Hey everybody, before we start the show, I just wanted to remind you that I have an original RPG called Burn Bright. It's a science fantasy role-playing game that was built for the Roll20 virtual tabletop platform from the ground up. You should definitely check it out at burnbright.com. That's BURNBRYTE.com. That's right, Bright is spelled BRYTE. You'll see why when you check out the game. Anyway, it is an amazing sci-fi adventure that dares you to hope at the end of all things. It is a labor of love that I have been working on for 3 years. I'm the lead designer of this project. So please, please, please go check it out. Burnbright, BRYTE.com. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I'm talking with Makenzie. Makenzie is an amazing game designer. Makenzie just graduated from college, and so Makenzie was doing awesome stuff while in the college. Really just one of the greatest and kindest and most responsible humans you will meet, and very, very creative and brilliant. I have had the pleasure of working with Makenzie on some stuff at MCDM, and so it was great to be able to interview Makenzie. So here is my podcast interview with the great Makenzie. All right, everybody. Now I am here with one of my favorite people in role-playing games. Makenzie, for people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi, so I'm Makenzie De Armas, Makenzie Lane DA on Twitter. I'm in general just an independent TTRPG content creator, but I'm most well known for my work as one of the co-designers for MCDM's Kingdoms in Warfare, contributor for D&D Beyond, and as the lead writer for The Islands of Sina Una, which is an upcoming D&D 5e setting based on pre-colonial Filipino mythology. I also do a lot of work in the streaming sphere, so you can usually find me over working with Scraticus Academy and Gilding Light as a recurring cast member for both of them, helping out with charity streams, DMing for new players to welcome them into streaming or Dungeons & Dragons, and just generally having a fun, chaotic time.
Yeah, definitely. You're very busy, and you're doing a lot of different stuff. You're streaming, you're doing a ton of game design. It's exciting, and it's awesome, and your work is great. We got to work together on Kingdoms in Warfare. We still are working together on Kingdoms in Warfare.
That project will never be done.
It never will be. It never will be.
It's so much fun, and I love it, but it's like, oh my God, I'm just looking at like the projected timeline of work, and I'm like, oh boy.
I know. I feel like right now I'm in this place where I'm like waiting for the other shoe to drop because the initial playtest kind of packet has gone out. And once that's in a good place, it's like, now write all the words.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's same here. I'm just like, okay, so it's been sent to the playtesters. They like it.
I know. It's very exciting. But your work on Kingdoms of Warfare, it's the kind of work that a game designer reads and thinks, I wish I had thought of this.
I was doing the exact same thing when I was reading your stuff, so the feeling is mutual.
That's very kind. Yeah, so it is. It's just super fun, and I think that you're bringing like a really fresh perspective and a lot of great ideas to design. How did you get started playing, and how did you get started then like make the leap to professional game designer and professional streamer and this being your life now?
I had always been interested in D&D, like, because I'd loved fantasy. I loved Tolkien. I loved C.S. Lewis. I loved a bunch of that stuff growing up. And so I'd always have like a peripheral interest in D&D, but I didn't have a lot of people in my neighborhood where I grew up who knew of the game or played it. So I just kind of knew D&D as, oh, it's that fantasy game that looks super cool that is over there in the distance. Cool, I'll do that one day. And it just so happened that the summer between junior and senior year of high school, I went to this summer camp, which was also coincidentally the summer camp where I met my partner. And they had done an introductory session for D&D where we only rolled like D20s. We used flat damage for everything. And we had groups of people controlling characters. So me and my not partner at the time, but now partner, we controlled the bard together. We fell in love with Vicious Mockery, and I think that's the thing that just got me into D&D, because I didn't realize oh, D&D is a game where you can insult someone to death? Oh, that's super funny. I like it. And then when we went to university, Dennis had my partner Dennis had a D&D group over at his university. The one at my university said they were full and they weren't accepting new players. So I was just sort of listening to him regale stories from his adventures in the Underdark. And so at some point he said, "Hey, so I know you have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about, but I found this really cool show where a bunch of voice actors play Dungeons and Dragons, and you should totally check it out so you know what I'm talking about." And so I started binging Critical Role, and then I surpassed where he was in Critical Role, and I kept going. And then at some point I bugged him to DM for me and a group of my friends, and then we kept doing that. Sort of. We started a podcast together, mostly just so that we actually kept doing a campaign together. Not for any like fame or anything. It was just to hold us accountable to actually completing something. And through starting that podcast, I started getting involved a little bit more in the online space. And that was the same time I met James Hake, who was an alumni from my university. So we connected through that. And I started basically just putting around on the Twitter TTRPG space, and Scrat found me somewhere on the internet and sent me a message saying, "Hey, you want to be on a streamed one shot?" And I said yes. And then I have little impulse control and a lot to prove, so I just kept saying yes to things that kept coming up. And that eventually led to me publishing stuff on DM's Guild and doing more streams and DMing for the first time, and everything sort of not spiraled because that sounds bad, but it just sort of kept going and going. And I was just like, okay, well, the ball's rolling. I'm going to just keep running with it and we'll see where it goes. And now we're here.
This is, and now you are
and now we're doing it professionally. And I'm like, I couldn't be happier with how things turned out. I'm so thrilled to be working with like D&D and TTRPGs professionally. It's not something I had ever thought I would do when I was starting out, just sort of playing for fun, but I really love it. And it really clicks well with my brain, just writing things modularly, because I always struggled doing in classwork when we were assigned short stories. I'd struggle so hard writing linear things, but with writing for D&D, it finally clicked for me where I was like, oh, I can just write sections and I don't have to worry too much about like having one continuous path. I can just sort of make things sort of like a flowchart, and that clicked so much better with my brain, and I just ran with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge, right? To be able to write well in the game design space. It's a different kind of writing. It's like a combination of creative and technical, and and you really excel in a huge way. And you've got all these projects now, and it's just amazing. Like the work that you have already put out in what is undoubtedly the beginning of a very long and prosperous career.
Knock on wood, knock on wood, knock on wood.
Knock on wood, knock on wood. I remember, I started checking out your stuff when we started to work together on Player's Guide to Capital, and reading it and being like, oh, wow, this is good. Like the stuff that you had already put out on DM's Guild was great. And, you can role play circles around many people. So like, it's very cool to see that there is this, from my old man perspective, right? This generation of people who are coming up, that you are sort of leading the charge of. No pressure, right?
It's fine. Everything's fine.
That are doing things with role-playing games that it feels like have not really been done, particularly in the D&D space. And I know you also look at a lot of indie games and play a lot of indie games too, and you're bringing some of those sensibilities as well to your D&D work, which I think is great.
Yeah, I have the weird position of being someone who works professionally in D&D but hasn't played any other previous editions. So I know a lot of people will reference things from 4E or third edition or a bunch of other things from past games, and I know that influences how they design for D&D. I don't have any of that reference. All my reference comes from playing other games online, and so I know a lot of what I bring to D&D and what I design with D&D is guided by that, instead of looking at like how other editions did D&D. And I know that sometimes is not helpful because I don't know like the history of D&D and like things that have always been in place. But at the same time, it's really cool to just see different ideas and go, oh, this translates well into what I want to do with this module. So I'm just going to borrow a little bit from what this system does and try and finagle around with it until it works. And I know that is makes me different than a lot of people who are big designers in the D&D space, because I don't have that long history past. But and it sometimes that's a little bit of pressure on me, but I enjoy it, and I like being able to look at things from a different angle, and it's super fun. So
Yeah, that's great. And I think that is a strength, being able to bring games outside of D&D. The history of D&D is there, and you can go back and play previous editions, which in some cases would be like a chore because of how technical and chunky. And there's this idea of, I think, sacred cows sometimes, especially in role-playing games with a long history like D&D, that me personally, and some of our listeners may balk at this, but like, I'm fine with letting sacred cows go, I guess. Letting things that we're holding on to for the sake of holding on to them go, because I think if we can make the game faster and more fun, more accessible for more people, that's better, right?
yeah, I know a lot of people I work with are definitely more on that side, and I definitely appreciate it. I know I have run into a little bit of trouble with some more diehard fans who are like, no, D&D has always been this way, and it must always continue to be this way. And I'm like, but does it though?
Well,
Does it have to be?
Yeah, and it's also not that, like, that a lot of that is not true if you look at like the original editions of D&D. So much has changed for the better. As one would expect, right? They were sort of just going at it in the dark, thinking, how do we make a game like this? And now we have fresh perspectives. I'm very excited to see what sort of things come out of brains like yours. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things you're working on. What are you very excited about these days that you're working on?
I'm just going to scream an NDA for about a minute. that's all I can do, man. Well, okay. So out of the things I can talk about, I'm really excited right now for the Islands of Sina Una, which is the setting I am lead writer for. It's so much fun being able to build a setting from pre-colonial Filipino mythology, especially because I'm Filipino myself, but I've never really had a strong connection to that heritage. I was born in America. I've grown up in America. I've never visited the Philippines. And honestly, my family has tried very hard to assimilate and leave a lot of that Filipino heritage behind. And so this being lead writer for this project gives me this opportunity to explore all that cultural heritage that I haven't really gotten a chance to. And it's so wonderful and fascinating to dive into these myths and see how the people of the pre-colonial Filipino time looked at natural phenomena and explained them through myths of their own. And it's so interesting to see things that were so commonly things that we know so well in like Greek myth or Norse myth, and seeing those same patterns emerge in pre-colonial Filipino mythology, but interpreted wildly differently. And it's fascinating, and it's so much fun being able to bring all of that new mythology into like mechanics and being able to actually like build little Lego blocks for people to play with later. And it's like, I'm so excited for people to see it.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. So I'm a backer of this project, a supporter of the project. Yeah, I met Josh at GameholeCon. He's actually going to come on the show after you as well. So told me about the project, and I saw a lot of people talking about it online. And we get a lot of, as I'm sure you are aware, right? A lot of European inspired medieval fantasy type stuff. So it's really cool to have a new book that is going to explore not just something that we don't explore a lot in role-playing games, but it feels like we don't explore a lot in many sort of entertainment mediums at all.
Yeah, a lot of, especially because this is a specifically pre-colonial Filipino project, because the Philippines have been through a lot. Just as an understatement, they've been through a lot. And so much of history has been like just lost. A lot of these myths we've had to, God bless the researchers on our team, they have dug deep into some like recesses of history to find information on things that were mentioned like once in a myth, but they were capitalized, so we're like, it looks important. It's so much was lost because of colonialization and imperialism, and so we don't get to see a lot of it in regular media, let alone fiction. So it's been super cool unearthing and piecing this back together in a way that is not only being able to retell the stories that from that era, but also being able to bring them so that people can actually interact with them and see how these people interpreted the world and almost live in it and continue that tradition of like that living history and keep bringing it again and again and again.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds intense in the workload as well. A lot of teams maybe have one researcher on them. So I heard you mention that. It sounds like people are doing deep dives for you.
Yeah, we have a lot of researchers. I don't know the exact number, but I know we have a bunch. A lot of them are station do live in the Philippines, and they have a lot of that cultural experience. But there's also just a lot of them searching on Amazon, trying to find texts, trying to figure out where this text was referencing this footnote, and then tracing that footnote to another book to see where that is getting, and then going to another footnote and bouncing again. I've had to do research for a lot of the things I've been working on, especially like the subclasses and the base classes. But I know our co-directors, so Lucia and Josh, have been even more entrenched in this research for longer than I have, and they are amazing and they know so much, and it's so cool being able to see them like work on this and just bring all of that to the forefront. And I'm the student in the back of the classroom frantically trying to catch up.
It's great though. It's great to be able to bring this to the world's most popular role-playing game in the sense that everybody will be able to understand the rules from the get-go, right? You mentioned that not only are you working on subclasses, but you're working on classes as well. Is there anything there that you can talk about? And what is it like to design a class in 5th edition? That's something that I have not actually ever tackled just because of the sheer dauntingness of making a class.
Mm. Yeah, we haven't started hashing out the actual mechanical design because we really want to make sure that when we design these subclasses, they have a very strong narrative base. There needs to be a reason for them existing, and we need to know where that class's arc is going to go so that we know what to build around. So Islands of Sina Una are going to have 2 new base classes. One is the Headhunter and one is the Babaylan. Like I said, we haven't started working on mechanical design on them yet, but we will be soon. And it is very daunting and I'm very scared, but I'm also super excited. So the Babaylan is essentially, to put it in very, very, very simplistic terms, witch, but not really. They are the leaders of villages, and they essentially serve as a conduit to spirits in this world. And in the world of Sina Una, spirits isn't just like a ghost. Everything in the world has a spirit. The trees have a spirit, the earth has a spirit, the sea has a spirit, the volcanoes have a spirit, you and I have spirits. And that is that undercurrent that hums and connects the entire world. And so the Babaylans serve as communicators between the spirit worlds and the real world, being able to talk to nature or talk to the ancestors and use that wisdom to guide and help their communities flourish. And headhunters are more of are like fighters, but they are different in their own way. It's not just like a fighter subclass. They have a certain ferocity to them and a certain almost not bravery, but just this ability to be stalwart and strong. It is our specific brand of combat that stands in the face of a lot of colonialism and that sort of almost martial and militaristic regiments. It's very interesting to work in that too, and also to take the presumptions that come with the term headhunter and flip them on their head, which seems wrong now that I say it out loud. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, right, for me, headhunter has a connotation that I'm like, oh, as me, would stay away from that in game design, right? But it's very cool to hear it sort of described as a staunch protector.
Yeah, I haven't, like I said, we're still working out like the narrative design on this. So everything I say has subject to change, but a lot of what the headhunter class is meant to be is reclaiming that term, and also looking at how warriors, when faced with colonizers and people coming into the Philippines, how they essentially were this vicious brute force that were just amazing and were able to take down these people who were, had like armor and cannons, and yet they were these people were still able to fight and just protect their land with this amazing ferocity. And so we're trying to channel that and not necessarily remove it from the colonial aspect, but basically reframe it into something that is more accurate to the history from our perspective, rather than just what has been reported back from Spanish colonizers.
It makes sense why your research has been so deep, and your research team has to do a lot of fact finding, right? So much of the research we work with, even in D&D terms, right, made up gods and things like that, is right at our fingertips in a wiki that 1,000 nerds are quick to correct every mistake on. It's very cool what you are doing, and I am excited to see it all sort of come to fruition. One of my favorite DM's Guild products of yours is called Pneumomancy. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes,
that
you are
correct?
saying it correctly.
Okay, excellent. So talk to me about Pneumomancy, because this is another subclass that I think is just like well designed, fun to read. The art is amazing. You also did the art for this.
I did the art for that.
Yes, yeah. Talk to me about this. I love it.
So Pneumomancy is one of my favorite subclasses I've designed. It's also the subclass that got me in a little bit of trouble with WotC because I got real angry at them. The whole origin for Pneumomancy was the kerfuffle about the love domain that came out before Valentine's Day.
Right. Yes, I remember this. It had a lot of shall we say, mind
Stevie?
control.
Yeah, it was a little like, ooh, that's not love. And I mean, from a designer perspective, I can kind of see where that came from, in the idea that a lot of what we consider love gods, like Aphrodite and things in that line, they're very much not like love. They're more like desire or lust. And the spells that were provided and the features provided did sort of lean more towards that. So I can see where they were going. But the flavor text surrounding the subclass was trying to make it focus on, like, family and friendship and good, and the wholesome kind of love. And then the spells were just completely disjoint from that. And I got mad because friendship and family means so much to me because of my experiences in the community and the people I've met. And I wanted to do, especially because found family means so much to me, specifically in relation to D&D, because a lot of my friends and a lot of the people who I consider family are people who I met through D&D. And it made me so frustrated to see that misrepresented with a lot of enchantment spells and a lot of mind control spells that didn't, at least for me, reach into the core of what love should be. And so I got angry on Twitter, and then I realized, you know what? If I'm going to be angry on Twitter, I got to put my money where my mouth is. And so for Valentine's Day, I made Pneumomancy, which is a wizard arcane tradition that focuses on love, but specifically bonds between people, and being able to look at what love means and how we actualize love, and then translating that into a way for people to help their party members and essentially bring that sort of ability to open up your heart and communicate and help your friends and family go through hard things, and bring that into D&D, where you do help your friends and family go through hardships, but on a much grander scale. So it was fun being able to bring that concept and showcase love in a healthy way through mechanics, and basically bringing that together. And also, like you said, I did the art, and I really enjoy doing the art for that because as part of the homage to the D&D community, I drew myself and a lot of my found family as D&D adventurers, and it was so much fun being able to bring that to life and honor the people who I love and I've met through this game in that way. And so the project evolved from being one out of spite to one genuinely out of love and respect for the community that has helped me so much.
Wow. That is really cool. It is just a really thought-provoking subclass in the sense that, like, when I read it, I was like, oh, you know what? I don't always think of my D&D, like the friends that I play D&D with, I think of as family, right? Our characters, I don't always think of that way. And I should, right? Like when I think of like what D&D characters go through together, the odds they face, even like just a typical going into a dungeon to slay a dragon to, save a bunch of villagers or that kind of thing. That is harrowing. That is a terrifying experience. And so it made me see the game in that light, but from the perspective of, but good things can come from that because you are performing heroic acts of love with people that you love, right? And it was like, oh, okay, so it doesn't need to be this is terrifying all the time, and it doesn't need to be we're a bunch of jerks who are murdering for money. Like there is this really just great perspective that I have had in other role-playing games, but it gave me that in D&D, which is very cool. So thank you for that. When you play D&D, how do you view your other party members? Is it with that lens of like, we're a family?
I think it depends on the game. I like trying to cultivate that sort of relationship. I know in a lot of my characters recently, found family has been a big thing because found family is a big thing for me currently. But like the first stream game I played in long term, we definitely ended up tending towards that found family relationship. And even the group that we played with, we still all regard each other as sisters. And then I think a couple other D&D characters I played were more like the, lone gunslinging rogue with a dark and mysterious past, and that was fun to play too. But the campaigns that have sat with me the most are ones where we did tend towards that bonding of a group that even if they hated each other at first, and I have played characters who have hated each other. I've played a character who was just kind of a jerk for I think 3 months of outside of game time, just 3 months of sessions of this character being a secret jerk, but being able to play that character developing from kind of a loner douchebag to someone like who genuinely loved and cared for their party members, and being able to play that transition was so cathartic and so much fun.
It's just inspiring and fun, I think, to think in that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that a lot of my campaigns are streamed. And so there is a little bit more of that performative aspect.
Sure.
Yeah. But there is also that because they're streamed, I spend a lot of time with the cast. And so we are friends getting together to play a game, but we're also friends who want to put on a good show, and we want to make sure that everyone is safe and having fun. And there is that sort of bonding of, knowing we're putting together a good show for people and having to brave putting that out in front of people sort of brings the players outside of game together, which helps brings the characters inside of game together. And having that rapport is just so much fun, and I love it so much.
It's very cool, and I think it also shows through in your adventure and encounter design, right? That you're also thinking about the game, I think, differently than a lot of people are, but in a way that when you design, you're able to bring people into that way of thinking. Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Elderwood Academy. Elderwood Academy are artisans who craft amazing gaming products, including dice towers, dice trays, dice boxes, deck boxes, dice, and so much more. All the products are crafted to look like spellbooks, scroll cases, codices, and other awesome fantasy gear we love. Now, what I want you to do is head on over to elderwoodacademy.com elderwoodacademy.com/don't split. That's elderwoodacademy.com/don't split. And what I want you to do is to go check out these awesome dice boxes that look like spell books. I have 2 of them in my home. They're leather bound, they're wood, they shut with magnets. They're amazing. You can get these custom inserts so you can hold dice, cards, pencils, minis, whatever you want. Awesome gaming gear. So go check out the spellbook game boxes at elderwoodacademy.com/don't split. That's elderwoodacademy.com/don't split, and tell them DSPN sent you. Let's get back to the babble. Let's talk a little bit about your encounters and the work you're doing with D&D Beyond. So how did that come up? You mentioned your connection to Joey Hake. I have a connection to Joey Hake as well, which got me actually my first paid writing gig in role-playing games. So he is a great connector of people and opportunity. So yeah, how did it come about, and what have you been doing?
Look, I can spend so much time just heaping praise onto Joey. He's just amazing. Gosh. So yeah, Joey, I owe a lot to him for actually getting me involved in the TTRPG community because, and we like to tell the story because it's the one time the Twitter algorithm worked in our favor. He tweeted something referencing a cafeteria on our school campus, and the Twitter algorithm was like, hey, Makenzie, you follow Matt Mercer. Matt Mercer follows this person. Maybe you'd like this tweet. And it was the one tweet that referenced our school. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And that's how we met. And so we've just I was a supporter of his actual play Worlds Apart, which was super cool. And I loved being able to talk with him and Hannah and the rest of the cast and the other people in that community Discord. And it was super fun getting that as my first sort of dip into the online community. And from there, working with or seeing them work on that show sort of inspired me to sort of do my own work. And that's how I kind of figured out how to start working on DM's Guild and sort of start publishing my own stuff and get more involved in Twitter. And so Joey and I have been just sort of on each other's peripheral radars for a while. But after PAX U, we did a panel together at that convention, and then afterwards he basically emailed me saying, hey, you want to write encounters involved with Critical Role? And I was like, yes yes yes. and that's how that started, and it was so exciting being able to work on that. And I loved reading everyone's encounters for that because both his encounters, Latia's encounters, and mine were so different, but in really good ways. They all played to different strengths and different role-playing styles, and it was just so much fun getting to play in that sandbox. And it's every time someone posts on Twitter like, hey, we used your encounter as the start of our campaign, I just go, it's so cool, and I get so happy. And it's just amazing. Anytime someone goes, I played this thing you wrote, I'm like, oh my god, you played it? That's so cool. And it just makes me so happy, and I'm like on cloud 9 for the rest of the day.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is really great whenever you hear from somebody, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you liked what I did. Oh, yay. I'm so happy. Because, I mean, like a lot of writing for TTRPGs is just sort of you write your encounter and then you send it off to the editor or the publisher, or you just sort of go like, here, fix it, make it look pretty, put it out into the world, and then it's just kind of left on its own, because that's the nature of TTRPGs. It's not like a story. I mean, it is a story, but it's not like a linear narrative where you know what's going to happen. You have no clue what's going to happen when a DM takes your adventure, or when players go through the temple you created. They could honestly like push a button you didn't think was there, and then something else happens. And it's just so cool being able to watch people take the building blocks you gave them and just sort of stack them on their own. It's just, It's like when you design a Lego set and then you just sort of give the pieces to someone and they build something, but they build it a little differently. And you're like, I didn't think you could do that, but that's super cool. And just being able to watch people build different models with it. It just, it blows my mind every time. It's just so cool.
I know. Yeah, one of my favorite things that, and I don't know if they're still doing this because it's been a long time since I've played with any Legos, was that Lego used to, on the back of the box, have like, and look at all these other things we built.
No. The sense where it was like, you could build this house, but you could also build this house, but you could also build a tree house. Those are my favorite. I had a obsession with Legos for the longest time, specifically Star Wars
Mhm.
Legos, but just Legos in general. And I loved breaking apart sets and then rebuilding them and then breaking them apart again and then rebuilding them. I feel like I gutted the Millennium Falcon like dozens of times because I was like, no, I want the hyperdrive here because I want a coffee machine there.
Wow, that's awesome. Yes, customize the Millennium
Oh
Falcon.
yeah,
Heck yes.
I ripped the hull off that thing. I like was like, let me put like a grappling hook from the snow speeder here. There we go. Go for it.
So you run and play in a lot of games online,
Yeah.
which I think even for some people who are old hat players is scary, right? Because all of a sudden your audience has grown from the friends you're having fun with to whoever else might be watching online.
Mm-hmm.
How is playing online different than playing in person? And what advice do you have for people who are maybe considering getting into it?
This is actually a pretty tricky question for me to answer because honestly, I don't have a lot of experience playing in person. And
Sure.
for me, I started playing online first. So I brought a lot of the things I brought to online play to sitting around a table. So I mean, I think the first couple games I played, they weren't online, but they also weren't really all of us didn't know what we were doing, so it was just kind of like, oh, we're figuring it out as we go. And so that was nice, but once we actually started learning how to play D&D and getting and for me personally really getting into how to play and how to DM and how to role play specifically, that all came from doing things online. And so when I started DMing things uh offline, I brought a lot of what I had learned from my stream DMs with me. Very theatrical, very. I love doing voices. I love being dramatic. I'm very much a very physical person, so I move a lot when I talk, and that I know isn't something that usually comes about in like local play. Um, so I know I take a lot of those more theatrical elements with me. I'm very much one of those DMs who makes sound effects with their mouth and just does silly voices and monster screams, and I enjoy that, and it's super fun for me. But I picked that up essentially because I learned by playing on stream. It's been really weird to know that like my journey as a D&D player and as a DM is essentially just recorded on the internet for everyone to see. So it's cool, and you can actually it's fun being able to watch how I've improved as a DM. But I think the first thing I ever DM'd was offline, but then after that, everything I have ever DM'd, except for maybe a couple games at PAX U, has just been online. And it's wild to know, like, oh, people can go back and watch how I've improved and worked as a DM, and that's cool. It's also a little weird, but I think it's cool.
I think we're going to see more and more people who have a story like that. The number of people I've talked to in the last year who kind of got their start online, right? Like the first game they really played was with a bunch of people watching them is mind-boggling. I think it's great because I think it's helping other people jump in, right? When I what did I start podcasting like 5, 6 years ago? There were not that many actual play podcasts or streams. There weren't that many people who were talking about it. And now it's like every day I feel like I hear about a totally new one that has crossing my radar, and it's great.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I think there's something so wonderful about seeing people who are new to everything just sort of taking the plunge and going to do stuff like this online because it inspires other people to just sort of go, I don't know anything, but they didn't and they did fine. So shoot, I'll try. And it just sort of starts off this chain effect of you see someone try and then you're like, oh, well, they didn't have a lot of experience, but they looked like they had fun. I might as well give it a go. And it just sort of keeps going and going from there. And that's something I want to do as I keep DMing and playing on streams. A lot of why I love doing it is being able to show people who are watching that you don't necessarily need like a really storied history of D&D or like intricate knowledge of all the rules and histories and source books and possible class combinations and creatures and all of that to just sort of have fun as a DM. I want to when people look to streams and podcasts on how to DM, they see a lot of like this, not necessarily the same things, but a lot of very similar faces doing it. And I want to be able to show people that like you don't have to DM in this style specifically. You can find your own style that blends a little bit of like Mercer style with a little bit of like Perkins's style, and just sort of mix and matching and stuff.
Sure,
And
a
I
little
want,
bit of
yeah,
Makenzie style, right?
that's something I would love to like. You know, bucket list of mine is being like the DM who inspires someone to like pick up a book and start DMing. Like that. That's the bucket list for me. Is just being a person who, I guess, not necessarily people look up to, but being a DM who people know and who people look at and go, and don't necessarily compare me to like someone else, but essentially go, oh, she's a DM of this same caliber as the other DMs, and being able to show that, hey, you don't have to be, you know, a older white cis man to DM.
Yeah. Well, again, James Hake and I joke all the time. The number of Jameses, the number of Matts, the number of Chris's, right? All of these names, but the number of we need more Mackenzies, we need more Christina Ariels, right? We need more people because it is in a huge way, right? Like there are numbers to prove this that it's opening up the hobby in new spaces, and we're getting more people, and then we get these new ideas. And like, you know, we spent the good first half of this show talking about all the cool stuff you're doing that we wouldn't have if you weren't part of this, right? You know, and listen, there's always going to be space for a James or Chris or a Matt. I think we've proven that. So like,
Yep.
I'm not.
It's not bad. Like, yeah. Oh, I love every single James and Chris and Matt that I've worked with. They're all amazing. It's just at some point, it's like, I wonder how many other people would be inspired to start if they saw someone who looked like them working and thriving in the space. Like, how many new ideas would people be able to express, and how many people would be inspired to start working on DM Field if they saw, like, you know, if they saw me, a hapless college student who kind of doesn't know what she's doing but is trying her best, and just sort of putting it out there and taking the plunge to do things on DM's Guild. How many more people would get over their, not necessarily fear, but their apprehension of putting their work out there and trying to get involved in D&D if they were able to see someone who looked like them doing it? Like, that seems like such an untapped potential, and I want to facilitate more and more ideas and more people getting into the hobby if best I can, by just being loud and getting involved with so many things.
Yes, and I want that too. I definitely want to continue to work with you, hopefully, on things, but also just be a fan of yours and a person who is buying up all the Makenzie De Armas stuff.
It's okay. I'm gonna keep being a fan of you. I'm gonna keep screaming across the internet at how wonderful you are. So just get ready.
Hooray! Yeah, we'll support each other, and I, you know, but it's awesome. What you're doing is really cool, and it's great that you are out there shouting about it, because nobody else is going to do that when you first get started. And so you've shouted loud enough now that people know, and we can help shout with you now, which is great.
I'm gonna keep kicking down those doors until I end up in Seattle and I kick down Watsy's door, like, let me in.
That would be amazing. That would be really great. I hope that they do. If I ever
get invited to Watsy headquarters, that is how I'm entering. I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna be like, yep, right, I'm in here. Let me in.
That's great. That's awesome. Yes, just chain yourself to a desk. Be like, listen, Chris Perkins, this is my desk now.
This is my desk. Let me in.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Makenzie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was amazing. And I always love talking with you, just like as a friend, and just being able to chat TTRPGs and D&D with someone who's also a creator I admire is great.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you. Before we go, where can people find you on the internet?
So you can usually find me screaming into the void on Twitter at Makenzie Lane DA. That's spelled MakenziLaneda. I have to spell that because my name is spelled funny. usually I'm over there. If you want to see my face reacting to things on stream, you can usually check me out over on the Scraticus Academy and over on Gilding Light, which are essentially my two home bases. I do a lot of playing, a lot of DMing. I contribute to charity streams, and I just generally have a lot of fun. That community is amazing. And I also suggest if you are listening and you want to get involved into the streaming community, go start there. It is super welcoming and super fun. And if you say Tabletop Babble sent you, I will come screaming with open arms, like, yes, come here, welcome.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This is amazing.
Thank you so much again for having me. Like I said, this is so much fun. I love talking about stuff, and I also just love chatting with friends.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening to Makenzie and I chat. You know, if you love Tabletop Babble, you should leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help other people find the show. It is very, very helpful, and it will be super helpful to the new hosts. That's right, I am leaving Tabletop Babble as its host and showrunner after episode 200. That's my final episode, is episode 200. And then it will head over to the Geekspective Podcast Network, where Amber, Kenny, and John are going to take over as hosts, and Amber is going to be the showrunner. I'm very excited to become a listener of Tabletop Babble and to support the show with my own 5-star review once it heads on over to there. But let's give them a strong start. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave the show a 5-star review. And don't forget to check out Burnbright, burnbright.com, BRYTE.com, for some awesome science fantasy role-playing, an original experience, original mechanics, original system built from the ground up for Roll20. Go check it out. And hey, if you want to look at more of the stuff I'm doing, head on over to worldbuilderblog.com and follow me on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's JamesIntrocaso. Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. This episode of Tabletop Babble was edited by Nate Pauzanga. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget to love RPGs with your whole heart all the time!
I'm Lisa Chen, and I host Behold Her, a monthly podcast that shines a spotlight on women in the world of tabletop games. There are so many women to behold in this amazing hobby, and our experiences as female gamers are as diverse as we are as individuals. Through one-on-one interviews, audio essays, and panel discussions, all centered around a monthly theme, the guests on Behold Her share their unique stories as players, game masters, designers, artists, organizers, and so much more. Their words are inspiring, uplifting, and informative. Check out Behold Her Podcast wherever podcasts are found, or visit beholdherpodcast.com.